Welcome to our Power Breakfast. You've been just joining us. Last year, December 15th, an attempted coup was allegedly staged on the government of Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, resulting in the tensions that have led into a spiral of violence in an apparently expanding civil strife in South Sudan. Peace talks have been going on in Addis Ababa to try and find a solution. And last Friday, a peace agreement was signed between President Salva Kiir and now rebel leader and former Vice President Riek Machar. We are joined in the studio today by this government spokesman, Michael Lueth, who is also the second lead negotiator for the government of South Sudan in the ongoing peace talks in Addis Ababa. Mr. Lueth is also the Minister for Information and Broadcasting of South Sudan. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps to start off, bring us up to speed with the peace talks in Addis. How far are we?
So far we are moving well, but at snail speed. After the signing of the agreement between President Salva and the rebel leader Riek Machar, the agreement turned out to be rather fragile. It was not respected and was immediately violated within less than 24 hours from the time of its coming into effect. And the two parties have exchanged accusations. Of course, on our side, it is the rebels who attacked us, and they attacked us in 5 positions. And we presented our protest to the envoys, and the MVM team have confirmed that the rebels attacked our positions, especially at Rupkone, where they could monitor it. Other places they could not monitor them because up to this moment the monitors are not in place because of the absence of the defense of the protection unit that would protect the observers. So the observers are not in place, and as such the two parties have traded accusations. The observers are supposed to be there so that they present their reports in accordance with what they have seen on the ground. So up to now, the agreement is not
holding.
It's not holding.
The question that one would ask is, what was the gist of the agreement? We hear there was an agreement to set up a transition national government and prepare a constitution before fresh elections are held. Is that accurate? And would you please just give us the details of that agreement that is not holding?
Well, the agreement, it started with the cessation of hostilities agreement on the 23rd of January 2014. The cessation of hostilities agreement provided for ceasing hostilities and deployment of establishment of a mechanism to monitor the abidance and of the parties with the cessation of hostilities.
Right.
And this mechanism was supposed to be protected by a force, which was at the beginning called the Protection and Deterrent Force. And at last it became only a protection force. This force is supposed to protect the monitors. And
supposed to comprise of which?
It's supposed to comprise of forces from Ethiopia, from Kenya, from Djibouti, from Rwanda, and Burundi.
Right.
Why are they not there?
Well, they are not there because the mediators, the mediation actually was faced with the problem of funding.
Okay.
They could not obtain the necessary funding
to deploy the troops.
To deploy the troops
on the ground. So they never deployed those forces.
They never deployed.
That is in January.
That is in
January. So the peace, the cessation of hostilities did not hold. It did not. It continued. So yes. Between January 23rd, leading up to the May agreement last Friday, there was fighting. But what I'm more keen on is, what did you agree on Friday that is not holding?
Well, on Friday, the parties agreed on to to abide by and respect the cessation of hostilities,
Yes.
to recommit themselves to respect and abide by the cessation of hostilities.
Yes.
And that is one. Number two, the parties agree to set up or to establish a government, an interim government of national unity, and that the mandate, the time frame, and the size of the government will be negotiated. This is what we are now trying to work out in Addis.
Right.
It was also agreed that that all the forces should stop where they are, no further movement ahead. That is, all the forces that are now on the ground, the forces of the two parties should stop wherever they are, and anybody who moves ahead after this will ultimately be in violation of the agreement. This is what was signed, and that was part of the cessation of hostilities.
Yes.
We are required also to continue thereafter to negotiate a permanent ceasefire,
Right.
so that so that there is peace,
Right. Right.
and all the rebels are encamped and organized.
Right.
That is one. Two. Number three, the parties also agreed that that during this period, during the transitional period, the task of the transitional government will be to agree, discuss, agree, and work for one, the permanent constitution.
Yes.
Two, permanent constitution. Two, to work on the referendum, and then finally conduct the elections. The time frame for this interim government will be negotiated in Addis.
What is the referendum about?
I'm sorry, not the referendum, the elections.
Elections, okay.
Yeah, elections.
Right.
Of course, as you know, elections are supposed to be conducted in July next year. But with this interruption now,
You have to find a new time.
we'll have to find out, to sit with the rebels and agree and see how best we can move forward. Whether it is possible for us to do all this within this period and run the elections or not. In case it is not possible for the parties to run the elections, then definitely we will have to agree on an appropriate time within which all this could be done.
President Kiir, when he came back to Juba, he said that he signed the agreement under duress. Is that the case?
Well, of course, we cannot really say that it was a duress, but it was through persuasion. They were persuaded, and they signed, and they signed the agreement.
Yeah.
So they don't believe in that agreement.
Why? Well, of course, it is anything that you have committed yourself to, that you are duty bound to respect it and abide by.
Is the government comfortable with that agreement?
Well, we are comfortable with it because, after all, it does not provide any details. The details are always, the devil is always in the details.
In the details.
And we have not yet worked out the details. And if the rebels have come to the details with an open mind, then definitely we'll be in a position to agree.
But you have said there are supposed to be forces deployed. The forces are not being deployed because there's no financing, there's no backing, monetary backing or to support. Well, how do you expect to get the money?
It is not us to get the money.
Whoever. Is it
is
United
IGAD.
Nations?
IGAD.
It is IGAD to raise the funds.
Yes.
IGAD went to the UN and requested the UN to fund this this operation.
Yeah.
And UN said, well, we are ready to fund it, provided that you put these forces under us.
Yes.
And as you know, in the south we have the UNIMIS force, which is their United Nations mission in South Sudan.
Yes.
That United Mission in South Sudan is there, and the UN said, if you want funds, bring this force, add them to the force which is already in the south, and we will fund it.
Yes.
Well, of course, the IGAD did not accept that.
Why?
And we also did not accept that.
The reason?
The reason being that for us as a government, we say IGAD is already overloaded, not IGAD, UNIMIS is already overloaded. It has it has not yet fulfilled its mandate. It is unable to deliver in accordance with its current mandate. That is the protection of the civilian population, observance of civil of rights, and all these things. Now, if you give it an additional task, then definitely you
Why
will
is it
be
not able to do that?
Well, they have their own problems. These are not our concerns. But for us, we thought that it is not appropriate to give additional tasks to UNMISS at a time when UNMISS has not delivered on its mandate.
So the solution is to do what?
So it was agreed. It was agreed by IGAD that they raise funds from any other sources. And I think they have managed to raise sources now from America, from Troika, from the European Union, and probably the forces will be deployed soon.
And these forces, they will be able to control what you are calling the rebels and the government soldiers?
Well, this force is not a combat force.
It's to prevent
It
and
is
protect.
only a protection unit that will protect the observers in the course of their movement inside South Sudan, whether in government-held areas or in the rebel-held areas. This is a force that will only provide protection. Their task is not to fight, but only to protect. But ultimately, in case they are in the course of protection, if they are attacked, they must defend themselves.
Let's look at the bigger problem in South Sudan. I mean, people looking at the conflict there thought that after you get independence from the north, and you got independence 2011, everything would be smooth running. You had fought for so many years. What is it that is now causing this huge division in the country? Brothers who fought together, you were general, commander, Riek Machar was a commander, you would split and come back, and all of you were together. Why would brother turn against brother? People don't understand.
Well, of course, Riek Machar, the rebel leader at present, we have had an early experience with him. In 1991, he rebelled against our late leader, Dr. John. And he is one actually who set back the liberation struggle. Otherwise, South Sudan would have been independent a long time ago. But because of his ambition, he decided to rebel against late Dr. John. And after rebelling, he failed to take over. And after failing to take over, he decided to join the government of Sudan and started fighting against us. He fought us for long. And after that, after realizing that he was not achieving his objective, he decided to come back to the movement. And he was welcome, he was forgiven and was welcome, he was reinstated in his original position, that position which he had abandoned. So he became the third person in the movement.
Yeah.
Now he continued like that up to that tragic death of our late leader. After that, he became number 2. Salva Kiir became the chairman of the SPLA, and he continued to be number 2 until of course, we lost our late leader after the signing of the CPA.
Yeah.
Now, Salva Kiir became the first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan and the president of the government of South Sudan. Riek Machar was the vice, so the president mandated him almost all his powers so that he continues to run the South, because the vice president, by virtue of his first vice president, by virtue of his position, ought to be in Khartoum.
Yeah.
So he continued to Khartoum. He would come to Juba only on visits, but he was based in Khartoum. Riek Machar continued to run the South until independence. After independence, President Salva came back. He became the president of the Republic of South Sudan. And the referendum was held and we became independent.
Yeah.
Elections.
Referendum. The elections were held,
Yeah,
Salva was
after.
elected,
Yes.
and so forth. But the referendum was held and the South became independent. After independence, Salva continued with Riek as his vice president. Riek after that began to develop interest in the office to become a president. This process continued for some time. There had been hiccups here and there between the two leaders, and at the end, a disagreement erupted in the SPLM.
Yes.
The SPLM constitution says the president or the chairman of the SPLM shall be the flag bearer for the office of the president. So if you want to be the president and being a member of the SPLM, you must first be the chairman of the party. We were supposed to hold our national convention last March,
Yes.
and elect the new leadership of the
SPLM.
party,
Yes.
of the party, including the chairman. There and then, so many people, some developed interest in the position of and they wanted to contest for the position together with the current chairman. Those who decided to contest were Rebecca Nyandeng, the wife of late John Garang. She's one of them. Pagana Mum was one of them. Riek Machar was one of them, plus Salfa, who is the sitting chairman.
Yes.
This of course, for the sitting chairman, nobody has thought of removing him, so he continues there. But the other three decided to contest against him.
Right.
This was the beginning of the crisis.
Of the problem. Yes.
We in the SPLM, we were also supposed to update our documents, update our manifesto and the constitution in accordance with the new situation, that is after independence.
Yeah.
Before independence, we were a subnational, and as a subnational, of course, our constitution and everything was talking the language of a subnational.
Yeah.
But after independence, we had to amend our constitution and the manifesto, and there were two provisions in the constitution that brought, which to me were not the main reason for the disagreement,
Yes.
but were taken by Riek as a good reason
To part ways. Yeah.
to part ways.
Yeah. Which were?
And these 2 points were, one, it says the system of voting shall be by show of hands in
Right.
the SPLM congresses.
Yes.
Shall be by show of hands. Riek Machar and others, and especially these three who had decided to contest,
Yes.
were joined themselves as one group now, followed by others, those of Deng Alor and the rest. They objected to the voting by show of hands.
So they wanted secret ballot.
Yes.
Okay.
And they wanted a secret ballot. The secret ballot to us, it does not work because the majority of our population is illiterate.
But what was the membership of the people who are, how many were to vote in that Congress?
The congresses, it is not one congress. In fact, the congresses and the congresses do start from the grassroots.
It's,
from the
Up to
grassroots.
the National Congress.
And you go on sending delegates to the higher level.
Okay.
You go on sending delegates to
So
the higher level.
the majority of, the Salva Kiir wing of SPLM thought we could not go secret ballot.
We could not go
because
secret
people are
ballot
not
because
competent.
after all, what is secret?
All right.
Because even the voting in the assembly,
Yeah.
in our assemblies,
You're still
by standing.
By standing.
not even voting by show of hands, but you stand.
Right.
So what is confidential about a party having its own congresses or meetings going
well, there are
to that
issues
way?
of democracy and secrecy of the ballot that people will argue that your ballot is a secret and you should not. We did that in Kenya. People say,
Yes.
standing up, you are exposed to your enemies. They can come for you and things like that. So there are obviously arguments against that.
Well, of course, our understanding is that as long as you are members of a party, there is no question of being enemies.
Okay.
That is one.
All right. The
Number
second
two,
question that would cause the breakup, yes. What?
Number two is that when you vote, voting, if you say voting should be a secret ballot and I'm illiterate, I will definitely call you to come and write it for me. Is
Yeah.
it any longer secret?
Yeah. Okay.
It's no longer secret.
all right,
And if the majority of our members are illiterate,
Okay, let's assume
then
that.
why should we expose, what is secret about about voting.
All right. What was the second point of departure?
Well, the second point of departure was that a chairperson at all levels
Yes.
was given 5% to nominate for the Congress.
Right.
This 5% was meant to address two issues. One, if you apply democracy, there are certain minorities that will not make it through democracy.
Yes.
These minorities can be appointed by the chair so that they become a part and parcel of the process.
But that minority
one.
must be specified.
Yeah,
that
of
it's
course,
not
of
left
course,
to
they are
discretion
known. They are
of-
known.
Yes,
They are
yes.
known, of course.
Yes.
That is one. Number two, this 5% will be used also for bringing up those party cadres who are not popular in their home areas. And as such, if people go in for elections, they will not make it. But they are needed by the party because they are the cadres of the party.
Okay.
This group, once they are left out, then they must be brought in.
Yeah.
These are the people who also benefit from that 5%.
Yes.
And some of these people who have rebelled today against Chairman Selfa, or if we are to say SPLM,
Yes.
and these people benefited from this 5%.
That nomination.
Some of them were nominated by the chairman
Okay.
so that they benefit from this 5% because they are
All right.
not popular in their home areas.
Okay. If you allow
Yeah.
me, I want to.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what happened, and then Salva Kiir, or rather Riek Machar, dissented from the party position. And then what happened?
Well, on the 6th of December, they held a press conference in which they officially declared that if these provisions are not corrected, then this country and the party will go into abyss.
Right.
This was clearly stated.
Yes.
And by then we were already preparing for the meeting of the NLC, that is the National Liberation Council. The National Liberation Council met on the 14th. It was open on the 14th, and the National Liberation Council meeting was attended by them all.
Okay.
The first sitting
Yes.
was attended by the opening session, and the continuation from there was attended by them on the 14th.
Yes.
There, and then we passed the manifesto, and we passed half of the Constitution. Then we adjourned for the other day. The other day was Sunday, so we had a meeting in the afternoon.
Right.
In the afternoon, Riek Machar and his group abstained.
Right.
They were 8 in number.
Okay.
They abstained, and we continued. Of course, their absence could not constitute anything because the majority was still there.
Right.
When they went to the first meeting, they thought they were under illusion that they will have the majority,
Okay.
so they may change everything, but things did not go as they planned. They found themselves alone as they were,
Yeah.
and so we continued with the meeting of the NLC, and the Constitution was passed with those provisions.
Okay.
The Constitution was passed on the 15th.
Yes.
In the evening of the 15th, we were supposed to have our closing session on the 16th.
Yes.
But because we had finished earlier, it was decided that we close it. So we closed the meeting of the NLC was closed on the 15th.
Yes.
On the same night,
Yes.
the rebels who had actually planned to make the coup and maybe apprehend us in the closing session. The closing session was supposed to be on the 16th.
Yes.
But when we brought it to the 15th, they found they had to change their plan.
Right.
It was hastily changed, and they started their rebellion immediately.
At night is when there was a
At
breakup.
night,
an
their
attempted
forces,
coup.
the forces attacked the headquarters of the presidential guards, and they captured it actually that night.
Right.
And fighting continued throughout the night until the morning of the 16th, whereby the forces were reorganized, and the
Repassed.
fighting spread almost all over
Juba.
It went to the general headquarters, to wherever all these forces are inside Juba. At last, at midday, the rebels were flushed out from Juba town.
Where was the president? when this happened, this attempted coup? Was
When
he in
this
the presidential
attempted coup
palace?
happened, the president was in his presidential palace.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, since then, I mean, obviously violence broke out. There's been an attempt to reach out to bring the peace. What is the contention of the rebels, as far as you can tell? What are their demands on the government?
In fact, what I can say is that the rebels so far have not come up to give us what are their good reasons for the rebellion.
Well, you just specified that, of course, Riek Machar saw he had no opportunity to win, given his demands were not being met, so he had to exit. But
Well,
after the exit and a breakaway, then withdrawing to, you know, their territory where they're fighting from, what are the demands? Do they want an independent state? Do they what do they want?
Their demands, they don't want an independent state, but Riek Machar wanted to climb the ladder and be the president. This was his.
Does he want to be a
He wants to be the
through
president. He wants to be the president of the Republic of South Sudan. One thing, Riek Machar wanted to be the president, but on realizing that through democracy he cannot make it, he decided to make a shortcut.
Right.
And this shortcut is what brought this disaster to South Sudan now. He decided to plan a coup,
Right.
and the coup failed. And after the failure of the coup, he decided now to move out and declare a liberation struggle. And before he could declare the liberation struggle, Riek appealed to the sentiments of his tribesmen, saying that the Nuer people have been killed in Juba, you the Nuer move to Juba, go and bury your dead. In so doing, he managed to mobilize the Nuer community. Not all of them, of course.
Yes.
But he managed to mobilize a sizable number of Nuer community and started his. And thereafter, instead of, because at the beginning he was calling it a Nuer Dinka.
Well, okay,
fight.
that seems to go to the root of the problem that has been identified. That one, the government of Salva Kiir has been accused of corruption, you know, huge corruption, and two, tribalism. You know, I mean, this is an African problem, and obviously Sudan has a bigger one because of the Dinka-Nuer contest. To what extent has the government found this legitimate?
Well, in the first place, let me say that the fight, what took place in the south, is not between the Dinka and the Nuer. Yes, it is true Riek Machar is a Nuer and Salva Kiir is a Dinka. But the fact that they belong to these two tribes does not mean that the fight is between the Dinka and the Nuer.
Yes.
It will be between the rebels and the government.
But the rebels
This is the most important thing.
But the rebels,
yes, for the rebels,
mainly now, they have defined themselves as mainly Nuer,
they
fighting Dinka, mainly.
The Nuer now, the rebels now, in fact, that was the policy of Riek Machar to mobilize the Nuer.
Right.
But after having mobilized them, he abandoned that principle of Dinka-Nuer thing because he got what he wanted. And now declared his to be a liberation struggle. A liberation struggle by rebels who call themselves the SPLM, SPLA in opposition, fighting the government of South Sudan. So here, this question of tribal element
Right.
being brought in
Yeah.
was used by Riek Machar in a very limited, for a specific period in order to mobilize
Support. Right.
Let me ask
And
you,
after having got the support, he decided to change.
do you have Nuer people in the government and in the military who are still in the government and in the military?
Yes, at present we have army officers,
Senior army officers?
senior army officers who are
Who are
still who have not joined them. We have ministers in the government who have not joined them. We have army officers in the other regular forces, in the police, prisons, wildlife, fire brigade, who have not joined them. So, that is one. Number two, it is in terms of the fighting force on the ground that the majority of the forces of the rebels are from the Nuer. But if you come to the political level,
Yes.
now in the delegation in Addis, it comprises of different nationalities. They are not Nuer only.
In the rebels, on the rebel side?
Of the rebel side.
Right.
So this idea of saying, because on the rebel side there are even Dinkas.
Right.
Then if there are Dinkas on the other side, how do you refer to it now as a Nuer rebellion?
Well,
or a Nuer fighting Dinka? If it is Nuer fighting Dinka, then definitely the Dinkas must make sure that they are on one side and the Nuer are on the other.
yeah.
So this is not a Nuer Dinka fight.
Okay, in an attempt to quell the rebellion, the government has been accused of committing very serious atrocities. I mean, both government as well as rebels have been accused of very serious atrocities. Somebody would wonder, isn't the government concerned that it's mowing down, killing a lot of people, its own citizens, in an attempt to quell that rebellion?
Well, before I go there, let me, of course, there you have had a question on the issues of corruption.
Yes.
If at all there are any groups or any people to be charged of corruption, it is Riek Machar and these former detainees who pretended not to be part of Riek Machar and have now joined him. They are now together in Addis. These are the people who are corrupt. These are the people who had been in the government since 2005. They have been there. Riek Machar knows what he has done in terms of corruption. Everybody knows what
there was a report that listed 75 officials, was it, associated with the corruption, and it had a cross-board, including people in government as well as those now you're mentioning in the opposition.
Yes, yes. And now there is, we don't deny that there is corruption in the South. Corruption is a normal, it is a disease that is actually infecting so many countries in the world. So South Sudan is not an exception. We don't deny that there is corruption. But when the very corrupt people who actually exploited the goodwill of President Salva, when they are the very people who come up and point an accusing finger to Salva Kiir and to the government, that this is a corrupt government. Yeah. At the time when they were, the vice president was the first vice president and was the one in charge of South Sudan since then, since 2005 up to independence. All these people who have now rebel against President Salva are the very people who own properties, and they are the very people who are very much involved in corruption. Okay. Not that only, but even earlier, a request was presented to Salva Kiir that he should clean up his government because most of the ministers are corrupt. Yeah. And it is after doing it.
So, okay, corruption was
that brought in this crisis. How can these same corrupt people now turn against Salva Kiir and begin to charge him of corruption?
Okay.
Some of them are actually have pending cases in the under investigation in the Ministry of Justice.
Let's look at the nature of the conflict and the the brutal nature of these operations.
Well, in terms of the operations, it is we don't deny that in the course of any fighting, whenever there is a fight, then definitely there must be death, especially if the fighting takes place in a residential or a civilian residential area. It becomes difficult to separate between issues. And when the rebels, the fighting started, and this fighting started in the civilian residential areas, because in South Sudan or in Juba in particular, the place where the fighting started actually was outside Juba, but with Juba developing and expanding, it is engulfed and it has become inside the town. Yeah. Now when such a fighting starts, it becomes difficult to control that situation. Most of the people, most of the population who unfortunately lost their lives due to those who actually fell in the crossfiring.
Collateral damage.
Okay. All right, let's look at the ceasefire. Is the government going to observe the ceasefire that was signed on Friday?
As a government, we have been very clear from day one that we are committed to ceasefire we will abide by it, we respect it, and we call upon the rebels to respect it and abide by it. It is the rebels who have been attacking government positions all this time, and the government had been defending itself. And at the end, when the government realized that this thing was not stopping,
yes,
we as a government decided, because the government is under a constitutional obligation to protect the people of South Sudan and their properties. And if the rebels continue to violate, then with those warnings which we have been giving to the rebels to respect and abide by the cessation of hostilities, then we as a government decided to stop that.
What is the extent of the control of areas? The areas controlled by the government, and the areas controlled by what you are calling the rebels. I don't think they call themselves the rebels anyway. What is the extent of the control?
Well, of course, nobody would ever call himself a rebel, but you give him a name.
Yes.
Because who is a rebel after all? A rebel is that person who has decided to go against the system and against the law. So he has rebelled from the system.
Yeah.
As to whether they call themselves what? They call themselves SPLM, SPLA in opposition.
In opposition, yes.
That is their name.
Now give me the area of the
now for their areas, they are at present under the area now which is under them is they are now under, it is Akobo now in Jonglei State, Akobo County.
Yes. How many
counties? At the Ethiopian borders.
Yes.
They have another area in Pagak and Mayud in northern Upper Nile. In Upper Nile, okay. In Upper Nile. That is in the northeast of Upper Nile. These are the only three areas where they are now.
Are those areas predominantly Nuer dominated?
Yes.
They are mainly Nuer areas.
Yes.
And it is not possible for the government to go and defeat them without any assistance.
Well,
the government of Sudan cannot go and flush them out.
Well, of course, we were about to flush them out had it not been this cessation of hostilities. We abided.
But there was a time you trying to capture one town and it was not possible.
We captured it. There is no one town we have tried to capture, but we have captured positions from them. We have captured their headquarters, which is Nasser.
Well, there have been claims that the government of Salva Kiir is not strong enough, and the troops are not loyal enough, and so you had to bring in Ugandan troops to back or protect the presidency. What are the troops of Ugandan troops doing?
Well, the question of that the government of South Sudan forces, they are not forces of Salva Kiir, they are forces of they are government forces. These forces are not weak, but what happened is this. President Salva Kiir, in search of peace, decided to integrate so many other armed groups. And those other armed groups turn out to be almost all Nuer. Those who were militias with the north, with Khartoum. And the government decided, in search of peace, the government decided to integrate them into South Sudan forces. These forces continued to swell. And at the end, and this is what actually encouraged Riek Machar to rebel, the forces of Nuer in the armed forces and the other regular forces swelled to over 65%.
Began to outnumber the Dinka.
They not outnumbered the Dinkas, but outnumbered the SPLA forces.
Okay.
Outnumbered the SPLA forces who were actually fighting
for liberation.
For liberation.
Yeah.
Now, this force, after being integrated like that for that long, Riek Machar, on realizing that now he has a good number and that he is capable of ruling now, and on realizing that he cannot come to power through democracy, he decided to make a shortcut, believing that these forces can
then
be used
what you're
to take
explaining
over.
is that
the coming of Ugandans
required, yes, Ugandan forces.
Yes. The coming of Ugandan forces we have an agreement, a pact, with the Ugandan government.
Right.
And that pact was operationalized.
What
It is just a normal thing that usually happens anywhere.
Yes, the Ugandan forces that they are
so
to
the
support
Ugandan
the
forces came in to support the government forces.
Yes.
And they were actually stationed in Juba. And they then moved with the SPLA forces up to Bor Town. And from Bor Town, they have not moved a step outside Bor Town.
Right.
They are now based in Juba and Bor only.
To protect the government from...
They are there to protect, in case of any extension again of the rebels, then they have the right to...
What is the involvement of Kenya? What is Kenyan involvement in this fight?
Well, the involvement of Kenya is only involved in the IGAD, as a member of IGAD.
Do you have any military people in Kenyan military in the Sudan?
Kenyan military people may go in case the protection unit goes.
As of now, they are not there.
But as of now, they have not yet.
There have been calls for sanctions against the government,
Yes.
the two leaders, both in government as well as in the opposition, to pressure for peace to be arrived at quickly. What is the government's position?
Well, of course, we as a government, I think there is no reason for international community to pass a hasty judgment on the two parties.
How would you call that hasty? When for
I
5 months people have been killed,
I call it hasty.
the violence continues.
I call it hasty because this issue came up after the signing of the last agreement. In the first place, you need to verify and know who is really responsible for the violation. It's not a question of if you attack me today and I defend myself, am I in violation of the agreement?
But if you kill children and women,
no, I'm not.
and you call them collateral damage, and they are killed en masse.
No,
that is not.
Yes, you need to verify who did it, because it's not enough that
both sides are doing it.
That is the sweeping statement, a sweeping report, which is usually presented by UNIMIS.
Yeah.
And for your information, we are in crisis with UNIMIS.
The government.
The government of South Sudan is in crisis with UNIMIS,
United Nations,
especially
so to speak.
UN, United Nations mission in South Sudan.
Right.
The reason
Especially after the apprehension of those arms
being transported
by land by UN.
Yeah.
It is thereafter that UNIMIS now started to render these controversial reports, which are not substantiated. We, after all, we have not committed any atrocities against the civil population as a government.
Well,
but if any, then it has to be proved. So this idea of the UN passing sanctions or the Americans passing sanctions against the two parties,
right,
is to me is hasty, and I think should be given more time it should be studied. Give more time so that you take an informed decision. Finally,
the government supports the deployment of UN forces. There's been a resolution to deploy, including Kenyan troops, to South Sudan. Is the government happy with that development?
Well, of course, there had been an earlier resolution that the number of the UN force in South Sudan should be increased. And there is the other resolution of IGAD for the deployment of the forces of the protection force that will go and protect the monitors.
Yes.
These are two separate forces. The task of the Kenyan force is to protect the monitors that will be going to South Sudan. We, as a government of South Sudan, we have no objection on the protection forces that are being deployed to South Sudan so that they go and protect the monitors.
All right.
So we have no objection on the deployment
finally, I mean,
of the
of course,
Kenyan
our viewers
forces.
are sending in a lot of comments, and somebody just asked, are Kenyans and Kenyan property or investment in South Sudan safe?
Well, of course, it is, in fact...
because South Sudanese investment in Kenya is definitely safe.
Well, for South Sudan, for Kenyan investment in South Sudan, they are safe, except those investments which might have been in those areas where a lot of destruction took place. Say investments like in places like Bor, Malakal, Bentiu.
Bentiu, yeah.
This, of course, must have been destroyed like others' properties. But for investments in other places, in the other 7 states, yeah, which are not affected by war,
yeah,
their investments are safe and everything is in place. So, what I can say is that Kenyans should not fear that, fear the people in South Sudan.
Although Kenyans have reportedly been harassed, and,
yeah, of course, some
beaten,
of them,
deported,
yeah,
suffered in the course of this war. Is
yeah,
there any
of
guarantee
course
the government gives,
well, of
seeing
course,
our long relations and hosting,
well, for our relations with the Kenyans, I think that we have nothing like that. If at all there had been any harassment, then must have been on the other side. Those who happen to fall in the hands of the rebels and so forth could be. What I can say is that yes, with that also I would like to say that we need the support of the Kenyan government and the people of Kenya.
Do you see any hope?
Because whatever affects South Sudan definitely affects Kenya.
Do you see any hope in the future? Those negotiations in Khartoum, do you see
in Addis?
In Addis, yes.
Yeah.
Do you see any hope?
You see a quick resolution?
Well, I'm optimistic that we will resolve, because what is agreed now is, I think, is within our reach. We are supposed to negotiate the government of national unity, and thereafter, the government of national unity will come up with will complete the rest. Ceasefire and government of national unity. Of course,
finally, and which I think before we close, because we are short of time, is that one of the proposals for that government of national unity is that both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir step aside so they have a transitional government without both of them. Is that proposal acceptable to the government?
Well, that is not definitely acceptable. The government, President Salva, who is a democratically elected president. And if he is a democratically elected president, then we must respect democracy. If we say that, yes, today let Riek Machar and Salva go, we are actually setting a bad precedent for the region. Because another person could get up tomorrow, yes, Salva can go today, but who comes next is the question. So what I'm saying is that we should not open up such a box. It is a Pandora box. Yes, today, Salva can go, even though democratically elected, and if the region decides that he must go, then he may have to go. But who comes next? We would have set a precedent, and meanwhile, those who say that let Salva go, let them think of who comes next.
Okay. I think we have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael Lueth, the government spokesman, government of South Sudan, and Minister for Information and Broadcasting, and also the second lead negotiator for the government in the ongoing peace talks in Addis Ababa between the government of South Sudan and the SPLM in the opposition, or rebels, led by former Vice President Riek Machar. Keep watching Power Breakfast.